Welcome in, everybody, to the RotoGrinders College Football Pre-Lock Show. I'm Mike Bedard, a.k.a. Dard Dog. Hosting today, Justin's out, so you got half of our usual crew, but Chop's joining us this week. Actually, between Chop and I think we had two of the top five on the Fanduel. Congrats, Chop, for the main slate Fanduel takedown last week. You basically blew everyone away by like 20 points, so congrats on that, man. Thanks for joining me this morning.
Yeah, good to be here. I needed something good to break for college football, so got that last week. Hopefully, I'd like to hit. I mean, FanDuel's nice, but
Yeah,
I really need something on DraftKings. That's what's killing me. So let's get something on DraftKings today, man.
Yeah, and DraftKings actually has a good. I actually didn't know, of course, before qualifying, but today's the 444 midseason main event, which is 100K to first. Of course, it's 300K prize pool, so 33% to first. So not the best payout structure, but I mean, just get first, and you don't have to worry about that, right? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, FanDuel. This just tells you last week. Last week I got demolished on DraftKings, and then Trey Palmer and Casey Thompson helped me out on FanDuel. So I do like that they have those full day slates. So that we'll get to FanDuel, both 14-game slates on DraftKings and FanDuel today. But Chop and I were talking about it before. This is probably, we've kind of had it easy in terms of no injuries or very minimal. People getting injured during the games, not before the games. Like last week, people just got annihilated with Jarrell Brock and Dylan Gabriel, Bryce Young. But today you got some injury news, especially in the early games. You got Dominic Lovett from Mizzou. He's 3,800. Man, Chop, just overall on the slate, this is probably the best DraftKings has done in terms of pricing. And he's really key to the slate early because there's not too many options. We'll get to some of the Texas Tech receivers later. But what do you think of DraftKings, just how they price this slate and just what it looks like overall?
It's really competitive. I've tried to build some teams yesterday in preparation for today, and it wasn't easy, and that's good. You don't want it to be easy. You want people to have to work for it, but yet it's not so hard that it makes it a miserable build and it makes it a miserable experience. They did a pretty good job. There's very few things that I really question. I mean, we'll talk about them as we go, but yeah, they did a really good job, man. They priced up the guys that needed to be priced up, so you can't just auto shove Bijan in there or anything like that. So, props to them, man. I wish this was like this every week.
Yeah, I think it helps and I mean, I build a good percentage of mine by hand, but it definitely helps you. Like you said, it wasn't like a crazy build, but you can build some between 6 and 7K lineups and feel pretty good about them. I honestly like these slates better when it's not, like you said, hey, they mispriced the starting running back. That's going to get all the carries at 3K. And it's just like, all right, now let me fill in all the other spots. So I think they did a good job on pricing. I think it just makes it, honestly, I think it just, if you're a better DFS player, it probably helps you when you can actually build and not everyone can just say, oh, there are 2 or 3 no-brainer plays that I can plug in. But let's start on the DraftKings main slate at quarterback. Definitely got some options here. My quarterback pool, I was trying to trim it down because you just have so many good options up here. Let's start in that high price. You see CJ Stroud is basically by himself. We saw what he did to this Michigan State pass defense last year. And I think a lot of people are expecting him to do the same. There are some win concerns in that game that we'll get to. But what do you think of these guys above 8K? Spencer Sanders and Hendon Hooker are going to be popular. I know, Michael Penix is someone I'm looking at for GPPs because he's stuck in no man's land. But what do you think of these top tier quarterbacks on the slate?
Yeah, this is a really interesting segment because so CJ Stroud really caught my attention when we got the news confirmed this morning that Mayan Williams was out, and we know Travion Henderson is banged up, so I don't think he just assumes that whole role and he's 100%. So then I'll start thinking, oh, Stroud, man, okay, they just may turn around and pass this thing like a lot today. And then you get the wind and with the weather, you check Ross weather and you say, oh, shoot, man, there's wind. So now I got to contend with that. So, and now he's priced up there. He's priced, I don't know if that's the highest on the slate, but it's higher than Bijan. So You really got to make some decisions. I actually think he comes in pretty under-owned. And, I'm interested in CJ Stroud. Now, I don't know. I don't have boots on the ground out there. I can't tell, if you guys are asking already in chat about the wind. I don't know, man. There is no, it's an arbitrary number. There's no defined cutoff. I'll go, well, if it's 25 mile an hour gust, I can't play. I don't know because the wind comes and it goes sometimes. How do we know that on that particular drive, the wind's not going to die down?
Yeah.
And he's just going to crush downfield. So I don't know how you play that all out, but he jumps off to me in this range as really good now that we got the news on Mayan Williams. So I really like CJ Stroud here. You say Penix for GPPs, yeah, nobody will have him. Same in the same vein, Stetson Bennett. Who's going to play Stetson Bennett up here when you got all these other guys? And like I think Sean was joking in chat yesterday, but somebody did probably just by talking noise about him. We probably have unleashed a 6-touchdown Bennett game, where he runs 2 in and throws 4.
Yeah.
He has those in him. Absolutely. All throughout the year, he has those in him. So you got him. And then there's Hooker. Hooker's the guy that's kind of like not doing it for me in this range. I get it. He's got some ownership on him and he's got a nice projection. But I look at these other guys around him and he's the one getting lost in the shuffle in my builds. LSU's not a pushover on defense. And, these other guys are really good. So Hendon Hooker's kind of like the one lost for me. And then there's Spencer Sanders, who's, what can you say, man? He's been really good this year. He's been great this year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm impressed by how much he's improved. And he's a real fantasy asset now, whereas he's been so inconsistent every other year he's been in there. But is this going to be the day they turn on to Dominic Richardson and let him eat and not even try to get into some shootout with Texas Tech? So I think this is a really good range, and it's going to be fun. I'm trying to shove some of these guys in here, but we'll talk about running backs. But there's some running backs I really like too, though. So it's tough.
Yeah, Stroud's just tough because he doesn't run, right? So like 9,200, and we saw him do it in like a quarter, like. They blew Michigan State out. I think they pulled the starters like mid-third quarter last year. But, I mean, he still got there, I think, with him. I think JSN kind of came out that game for sure. But Stroud's got to throw 4 or 5 touchdowns. So, you did mention, Mayan Williams is out. Travion is kind of banged up, so we'll see what he does. So, Stroud is interesting. I agree with you. I think he probably comes in a little lower owned than the 19 just because there isn't that much value. So, it's hard to, you can play Igbuka, which we'll get to, who's probably too cheap. But then Stroud – trying to fit him in with some of these running quarterbacks. Man, Spencer Sanders is interesting for GPP. Like you said, he's been so good, but like you've played college DFS a while. Like Spencer Sanders is due for that tank game, right? Like he's one of those guys. I know it doesn't make that big of a, from a fantasy perspective, but it's just like I love playing him when he's low owned, but when he's chalky and he's 8K now, I like Dominic Richardson a lot for GPPs, which we'll get to. But this is definitely an interesting range. I mentioned Penix. Arizona State is a dumpster fire, and he is the same as Stroud. He's $700 cheaper. He's going to come in, I bet you he's like 5%. So you can get 15, 20% of him in GPP. I really like pairing him with Odunze there. So let's move on to this mid-range, which once again, if you don't want to go up top, there are plenty of guys to below 8K, I would say. I'm probably not going to play any Davis Bevel. He looked awful last week. And I will mention Dylan Gabriel. It looks like he's warming up. So got to monitor that as well to see if he plays. I'd be shocked if he plays, but he is warming up. So you got to basically monitor that. But then Will Rogers. Will Rogers is going to go up against Arkansas. Terrible pass defense. I think, he's a lock to throw. I think, Ben mentioned him, over 350 yards. And then some other guys, Jalen Daniels, Max Duggan. I don't know what you think of these kind of in the 7K range. Donovan Smith is also, in a Zach Kittley offense. He's in a good spot. But if you don't want to go up top, I mean, I think this range is definitely going to be peppered with, Anthony Richardson, Jalen Daniels. You can go down, and all these guys are dual threat guys as well. So what do you think in kind of that mid-range from like 8K to like 6.8 or 6.7?
Yeah, these guys are – it's just some more good quarterbacks. I having a hard time narrowing it down in my player pool to who gets eliminated.
Yep.
Can't really eliminate. I don't want to eliminate Cam Rising. I think there's an outside shot. This is a big game out there out west, and there's an outside shot. This thing shoots out, and if so, like his legs do a lot for him. So you want that. And by the same token, the guy right underneath him, DTR. He's had some monster games in his career and this year. And if this thing gets to that elevated level of shootout, these guys are going to be awesome. So, and they both do it with their legs. That's what you like, dual threat. So can't eliminate them. Then you talk about Will Rogers. Arkansas is not particularly great in the back end, and they've got some injuries on defense. And it doesn't matter what the score is or what the situation. Leach doesn't know how to take his foot off the gas pedal. So we know we're going to get almost four full quarters out of Will Rogers of just throwing the ball. And so while he doesn't run that much, guys like him and Stroud, the one thing about DraftKings is you're locked into a bonus. Your 300 yards is almost a foregone conclusion unless they get hurt or something like that. So Will Rogers is definitely in the mix because now all we really need out of him is, and it sounds crazy, but we're not talking about the NFL. Just throw for 5 touchdowns, and we're good. And that's very doable. Like these guys do that all the time. So you get that at 7,700, your bonus and 5 touchdowns, you're doing good. Then it gets a little bit weird after that. Jackson Dart, probably not finding myself on with too much Jackson Dart.
Yeah.
So he might be the odd man out right there. Same with Jaden Daniels. I would probably like him a lot more if he hadn't left last week and was noticeably limping. And I'm not trying to play the injury card on him, but he's got to run. If he doesn't run, I don't want him in my lineup. And if an injury is going to keep him from running as much, he's not going to make the cut in any of my big builds. Maybe you throw these guys in that $15 tournament in an entry, and that's fine. But building for the 444, that's a lot of money to put on a guy like Dart or Daniels, and I don't trust them as much. But then you get down to a couple really good players. Max Duggan, like against Kansas, man, this is a good one. This might be the 2 best teams in the Big 12, believe it or not. So. Yeah. This might decide something down the road. This is a really big game. He's been incredible. This offense, this team in general, I can't say how much I've been impressed with the job that Dykes has done there and turning this thing around. So, Max Duggan, he was awesome last week. I don't want to fall in love with 1 week because it was an incredible week and it's fresh in our mind, but the guy has it in him to run and to pass. He spreads out his targets, so he's going to get his points. And this is a good matchup. Kansas, I don't think Kansas is all that particularly good on defense. I think they've caught some good matchups. I think TCU can exploit them. So as long as we don't feed Kendre Miller and the running backs, we're going to be all right here. So Dugan's good. And then you got the last guy I'll talk about in the 7K range, Donovan Smith. He's in that Oklahoma State game. If Tech can hold up their end of the bargain, there'll be a lot of points in that game. He's been better lately, Donovan Smith. I'd like to see him use his legs a little bit more, but, he's starting to get there. He's starting to look a little bit more normal now. When he first took over the reins here after the Tyler Shaw injury, he wasn't very good, but he's impressed me a lot more lately. So he's on the map, man, because Texas Tech is probably going to throw the ball a lot today. They're not much on the running game. I don't think they run very much against Oklahoma State, so he'll have a lot of opportunities to throw the ball, even if it's in catch-up mode. So I'm really interested in Donovan Smith. So that's how I would round up that 7K range.
Yeah, and I mention it all the time. People, and if people have read my breakdown enough, it's probably had every mention of Zach Kittley because I think that Texas Tech has been on the slate every week. But imagine last year Bailey Zappi in that Jarrett Stearns offense. So that's the same offense where they threw 40, 50 times a game. And then you have Donovan Smith who can also run it, right? So he just gives that upside as well. He's going to probably throw, 40 times in this game. They're at 10-point underdogs. So he's going to get a chance to throw. And if he breaks off a couple runs and runs for 50 yards and a touchdown, at 7K, that's going to pay off pretty easily. I'm with you on Dart. I just don't think that, Ole Miss just wants to pound the ball, and they've got a couple good running backs. We'll get to them. Kind of interesting what's happened in that backfield. But, yeah, I like Duggan a lot. Duggan, whichever. I like to say Duggan because then you can say teach me how to Duggan a lot easier. But, yeah, it's crazy that this game, A, that game day is in Kansas, and B, that both these teams, like you said, these teams are undefeated. The winner of this game is semi in the driver's. I think they both have to play. No, TCU doesn't have to play Oklahoma. So really, if TCU wins this game, The Big 12 is kind of a lot of fun this year. So yeah, let's move down to the 6Ks. I don't think you really need to punt outside of that. At least I don't have anyone in my player pool. But you start with some dual threat guys and Jalen Daniels and Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson's kind of getting forgotten a little bit on this slate. I mean, Missouri's defense is not good. They get a kind of a letdown spot after they were so close to taking down Georgia. I think 12% is probably there, but there are so many options that is what I like about this for GPPs too, is you can take stands on guys and not go crazy on them because you can get 20% of them be double the field. Baby Tua, he's back here against Purdue. Quinn Ewers is going to get the start for Texas. I think he's really intriguing for GPPs just because this Oklahoma defense is not good. He's back to full strength. He's got a ton of weapons behind him. Then you got two guys to round this out, J.J. McCarthy and Aiden O'Connell. Aiden O'Connell and Charlie Jones, they've just been that stack that you always look for. J.J. McCarthy is kind of weird because he's always, he's a dual threat guy, but like he's still in the Michigan offense. So you never know if Blake Corum's going to take that away from him. So what do you kind of look at when you look at these 6K quarterbacks?
So Jalen Daniels I'm having a tough time pulling the trigger on him. It's not a terrible matchup. I don't think it's a great matchup. It's not terrible, but I'm just trying to figure out. So maybe the book is out on him at some point. That it wasn't out earlier in the year here when he put up some big games. I go back to what he's done earlier in the year, and I'm trying to piece together: is this guy really this good? With anybody, and with him, okay, he put up a pretty big number against West Virginia. The game went to like double overtime or something. Okay.
Yeah.
Then he got Houston the next week. They weren't ready for him at all. And we've seen it after the fact. It's just not a good defense. And then he got Duke. Well, Duke's not a real challenge. Okay, finally squared off against a pretty decent Big 12 defense last week. It wasn't a great game at all for anybody, including him. So how's he going to do against TCU, who I think has talent on defense? So I think they're going to force him to run a little bit, which is good for fantasy. But can he? I don't know. I'm having a hard time pulling the trigger. Is what I'm saying. I don't know if I believe in him today as much. Maybe he proves me wrong, and then that's it. We can shut the book on it, and he's really good, and we move on. But having a hard time with him. Anthony Richardson, I do like that running upside, man. Anybody that can go out there and give you 100 yards rushing and get in the end zone and is the primary goal line back when you get down there, your quarterback. Yeah. You got to love it in GPPs. You just need to sprinkle in a little bit of passing and we'll be absolutely golden. So I like Anthony Richardson quite a bit. In tournaments, I probably don't play Baby Tua if I'm not running it back with Aiden O'Connell on the other end and Aiden O'Connell at 6K can be maybe a standalone play, but Tua, I kind of want, the only exposure I want to Tua is having a run back with Aiden in the same lineup. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying like 150 lineups. I won't find one that, the lineup builder gives me Tua by himself on accident or something, but yeah, he's been known to let us down quite a bit, although I think this is a really good game. And I think there's some potential here because the one thing I've noticed from Purdue this year is they really do a good job in shutting down the run. So they may be, I don't know if we're to the Michigan State level last year, but they may be a pass funnel defense. So maybe we can take advantage of that. I do like Quinn Ewers quite a bit also. Like I wasn't on the train after I saw the first game. And then I watched him in about a quarter and a half against Alabama, and I was like, okay, this is what they were talking about. This guy really is good. So if there's one thing I can expect from Texas and Oklahoma is that things are going to get crazy and there's going to be points scored. If there's not points scored, I'll be flat out shocked. So I do have interest in that because, well, he's got a lot of passes. The check down to Bijan where he breaks it for 50. You could get there and there. They could just want to pass the ball a little bit more today and get him into a real. They know what they got in Bijan. They may feel pretty comfortable in this game and say, let's get Quinn, back in the mix here, get him some confidence. This may be a pass-centered attack, So I'm with you on that one. I put him in my player pool when I found out he was in for sure. And then there's J.J. McCarthy. All right, I don't know what to do with that one because we know what the offense is, but guys like him, you never know when this is the game where the coach doesn't want to feed. We've been feeding Corum for the last 2 weeks, way too much. Let's back off of that. JJ, here's the game plan this week. We're going to throw it a little more. You take, step up your game a little more. We know we can beat Indiana. They're a really bad team. So, do something. And this may be his game. He may have two games this year where he goes ham. I think he will. And this may be one of them. So for those reasons, I can't just ignore the guy. But I don't know if I'm going to put him on a 444 team, though.
Yeah, I think in the past 2 weeks, Corum's got something like 35 carries or something like that. And like you said, Indiana is very bad. And so that's why I like Donovan Edwards a little bit on the running back side. But yeah, JJ, you just never know, right? Like I'll just keep dumping money into him until eventually he actually I haven't been playing him that much the last couple of weeks. But yeah, it's tough for DFS because like Baby Tua, it's just tough to pair him. Like that Maryland wide receiver room, like Jarrett is the guy, but he's not Charlie Jones, right? Like I won't play Aiden O'Connell without Charlie Jones for the most part. But I agree with you. I think that game shoots out. I think I actually have the over on that game. It's like 59.5. I think that's a little bit too low. I think that game gets a little underutilized in GPPs just because I didn't mention at the top, but you have 7 of these games that are in the 60s. So definitely agree with you there. Anthony Richardson, I think, has a chance to be the highest scoring quarterback on the slate. And at 6,800, you can get that discount. That's just these balance builds. Like I have a bunch of lineups that start like Richardson, Ewers, McCarthy, where you can just kind of jam in and make some balanced lineups. So I definitely think that's the way to go if you want to go not punt necessarily at quarterback, but go into the 6Ks. Let's go over to the running backs because like you said, do have a lot of guys here that you want to play. Bijan is obviously at the top, the main option, which, he basically should be every single week when he's on the slate. And then you have some interesting guys that, from Braylon Allen, who had 2 yards last week. 2 yards. That is nuts that you can just say Braylon Allen got Paul Chris fired, I guess, if you want to. But I think the Wisconsin team was just kind of a nightmare to begin with. But at the top, above this 8K, we'll just go from Corum up. What do you like in this range? I know you'll like Bijan, but then Tavion Thomas and Travion are interesting, but I'll let you go first.
Yeah. So just at the very top, Bijan, he's 9K on DraftKings. They get a good job there. I think he's the clear cut, obvious, like best thing you got going today. In sports and football, you never know though what may happen. But so if I'm running 10 teams in the big tournament, the 444. So right now I've got him on 4 teams. So 40%. Let's say they kind of messed up a little bit and put him at 8K, which is still kind of expensive. He'd probably be on eight teams of mine. Like they did a really good job. 9K is nothing to sneeze at. So that's not easy. So, but he's the clear cut. I do like Braylon Allen for tournaments though. There's no way, man. He's just too good to be like kept down for too long. And Northwestern is definitely nothing we're scared of for defense. So I do like Braylon Allen. And then Travion Henderson, you got to hear the whispers out there. The whispers are maybe he's not 100% healthy, but Mayan Williams is out. What do we like? Would it be a surprise to you? Would it be a surprise to you to look up at the end of this and say, well, they gave him 20 carries? Like if you told me right now Henderson's getting 20 carries, I'm locking him in.
Yep.
He's that good against this which isn't as good of a run defense as it was last year, not nearly as much. So it's just a matter of how much. And then also it wouldn't surprise me to look up at the end of the day and say he got 5 carries. He was on the field for 20 snaps. They didn't really need him and they didn't want him to, expose his injury anymore. So there's a big range there for Travion. So GPPs for sure. Blake Corum, I just talked about him with JJ McCarthy. Like, wouldn't surprise me to see them go a little bit more JJ McCarthy centric in the offense today. But is Jim Harbaugh? It wouldn't surprise me to see them jam him 30 straight times, running the ball. Again, that's what they do. So, yeah, man, it's a good range right here to be in. These are all GPP friendly guys. Are you counting Tavion Thomas in this range?
So I want to go over that. So if you guys aren't familiar, like remember Tavion Thomas at the end of last season? Like he got the ball every single time. I mean, this guy was a beast. I mean, you just had to play him. Like you couldn't fade him. Arizona State 2 weeks ago, no news. Although I did look on Twitter after the fact, and like he just had the crying, laughing emoji. So I don't know what that was about. But he sits the first half against Arizona State, gets 10 snaps last week against Oregon State in a blowout. You mentioned it. This is a big game. Like this game is probably for the Pac-12. I mean, early in the season. It's not for the faint of heart. I'd be surprised if he's 4%. I bet you Tavion Thomas in the big $15 tournament is 1 to 2%. I think, and the projection, right? 12 points is, that's probably good. But I'm going to probably have 5 or 10% of him just because I think this is a game. Like GPPs, no one's going to have him. You don't have to have too much. It is definitely like a long shot. Like he could definitely get 10 snaps like he did last week. But this is a big game. They need him. I just have a hunch, and this is more of a hunch than a projection, anything, that he gets a lot of work here. And so I think in GPPs, like you said, you run it back. You play Tavion Thomas with DTR and even to Jake Bobo. That's a really contrarian stack for GPPs. So not for the faint of heart, but I don't think he's the worst play in the world. Kind of move down a little bit. That DraftKings always has kind of a dead zone at like 7.5K with McIntosh and Gray. I don't know how you feel about them. But then as we get to the middle in this range right here, who would have thought that at the beginning of the season that Zach Evans would not be getting the majority of the carries in this Ole Miss backfield? And it's nothing like crazy to overreact about, but last week in a close game, Quinshon Judkins got all the carries, 15 carries to 9, but he outsnapped Evans as well. So Evans is really interesting for GPPs. Dominic Richardson, we mentioned him as possibly a pivot off of Spencer Sanders. And then Zach Charbonnet is one of my favorite plays at running back on the slate. I think he's a little bit too cheap here at 6.8K. And you have Valladay as well, who's just a usage monster, but he's just in a terrible game script. So what do you kind of think about this like 7.5 to 6.4 range?
Yeah. So Eric Gray, he has it in him. And with a quarterback that we're assuming Gabriel's not going to play today, who knows? But then I think Marcus Major is coming back today too. So maybe that takes a little. But then maybe they just say, you know what, we're no way we're going to pass the ball and win this game. We're going to keep that off. We're going to keep Bijan off the field, and we're going to run the ball. And who's to say Texas is a good run defense? There's nothing in the books that says Texas is this magically good run defense. So maybe they just pound Gray up in there, and he has a good day. So for those reasons, he's still a GPP option. Don't love him. Zach Evans, I just think most of his lack of playing time and carries lately is because of that nagging injury. I watch him when he's healthy, and Judkins is good, but he's not Zach Evans, man, not yet.
I agree.
So I don't think that I'm not willing to write Zach Evans off. In fact, this is the one team today that I actually have interest in a lineup in GPPs where I play both of those guys, because Lane Kiffin, he's just a good coach, and he's done what you're supposed to do, which is evolve your offense around the talent you have, and he's got some great running backs, and they'll just feed these guys today. I don't see a scenario where it's ever a Jackson Dart game. Like, he's just not that good passing the ball. So I like Zach Evans. I don't mind him. The one team where I pair the two running backs together, Judkins and Evans. So I'm in there. And the Dominic Richardson, he should be pretty heavily owned because he's got a decent price tag, and he's the number one back. And there's a lot of good things going. Their team total is like 38. 38. Like, he's going to get, and he's good. They could very well lean on him, and he could crush today. And he could be the guy that, you have to win a tournament. So I definitely have interest in him. Now the next guy's, Ray Davis. I don't know. He was a last minute addition to my player pool. I don't know. Sean's got him. Fear My Turtle and PSU have him so highly projected. It's hard to eliminate a guy like that completely. I kind of trust him, but at the same time, I don't see myself going to Ray Davis very much. But he's got it in him too. And then you mentioned Charbonnet. All he does is put up good numbers in big games. This is their offense. He's got 30+ DraftKings points the last 2 games. He's got 29 or more in 4 out of the 5 games this year. The one game he didn't get there was South Alabama, where I don't even know why he wasn't on the field very much. Mm-hmm. But he's just a really good back all around, and so you got to keep him in there, because if they are going to compete in this game, it's because of him. So you got to keep him in there. Valladay, he doesn't do it for me.
Yeah.
He just doesn't do it for me. So I don't know if you're including Judkins in this, or we're going to move him in the next range.
Yeah, you're good. You're good talking Judkins.
Yeah, he's good, man. He's really good. If they turn to him again, they're just going to run the ball a lot. I think there's room for both these guys to get fed. If he's going to be the lead back again, he could be a tournament winner. This is a cheap price for him. So he's definitely in the mix. And the one guy that's at the same price tag, Jabari Small, I think he's kind of going overlooked. LSU's not an easy matchup, but Tennessee, they play with pace. They get up there fast. They wear you down. He could break a couple long ones in this game. This could be his game. I never eliminated Tennessee #1 running back, no matter what the competition is. So Jabari Small is in the mix, especially in tournaments with that ownership number.
Yeah, and Jabari Small, if we get to, is like really live on Fanduel. I think he's cheaper on Fanduel than he is on DraftKings. So I don't think I have him in my player pool on DraftKings. I wouldn't fault you, but just because I have him more on Fanduel, because he's at a cheaper price. Interested, real quick, what you think on Raheem's Rocket Sanders, because sounds like KJ Jefferson. This line has definitely moved that KJ Jefferson's not going to play. If KJ doesn't play, I just think his offense is going to struggle big time. Like him being highly owned, I don't know what you're thinking on Rocket Sanders.
Let's see what that ownership looks like. Yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, that's a pretty big number. That's a pretty decent number, but yeah, it's a great price tag. I would prefer if KJ Jefferson was in the game, and I think that helps him. But there's nothing that he's done this year that shows me that he's not a great player, a great fantasy player. Like he's really good. So I like him. I'm going to keep him in the mix. I think that the matchup is, Mississippi State in years past has had a very stout run defense. It's not the case. It's the opposite this year. That run defense has given up a lot to a lot lesser backs. And Sanders just always seems to get there this year. So hell, he got there 100 yards against Alabama last week. How do you get the 100-yard bonus against Alabama? That's a tough deal, man. So, and he'll catch some passes out of the backfield. They've shown that for you this year. Like he's the center of this offense without KJ Jefferson or even with him. So I like him, man. I'll be over the field on the 20%. I can't take that stand on Sanders. I'll take a stand somewhere else.
Yeah, I got you. Just for me, especially that they're going to rotate quarterbacks, especially if they play Hornsby some, he's definitely not a passing threat. But KJ takes it away from him as well. So interested to see what kind of happens in that game. Moving along, we'll just go like sub 6K. I guess my big thing that I don't usually like to do, but I guess two of the running backs, if you want to go below 4K, are Antoine Littleton and Devin Maccabee that are projecting for some ownership. What do you just sub 6K? Is there any guys you really want to highlight there? I'm not going to play any of those 3K running backs. I'd rather punt at a wide receiver, but I guess say who are a couple of your favorite plays under 6K to just to round out the running backs?
Just to round them out, a couple guys. I'm interested in Taj Brooks. If the game turns shootout, he's the pass catching running back, so I'm interested in him. I'm very intrigued by Devin Neal and whether or not they do give him the lion's share of the carries, or if it's still going to remain a two-headed monster that just the next guy moves on up to his role. But if they were to give him some extra run in this game, Devin Neal is very interesting. And then the one guy that I'm going back and forth on in my player pool, and I've got him in there now, but it's a tough call, is Pete from Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
He's the best running back they got, I think. And it seems like the last couple of weeks they've wanted to get him more involved than the other guys. Elijah Young's still out. So he's just interesting, man. He's only 5K. Florida's been disastrous this year on defense against the run. So I don't know, man. He's had some tough matchups already. Like an Auburn matchup isn't easy at all. And then Georgia, of course, they're going to lock down everybody in the running game. And now you go to Florida, who's been a sieve on defense against the run. He's interesting for 5K.
Yeah, I dug deep more into that because obviously when you see a tag in lineup HQ, for the most part, you got to look into that guy. Florida has definitely been bad against the run, but when you look at the teams that they've played, they've been all run-heavy teams. They played Utah, USF, Kentucky, and guys that really like to run the ball on them. So I don't think they have a good rush defense for any measure, but I think their numbers might be a little bit inflated just based on who they've played early in the season. And Pete is going to split a little bit of time. They've kind of got a three-headed backfield right now. So I think Pete's interesting. That game, Florida, Missouri, I think has some sneaky shootout potential. Like every game on the slate besides Wisconsin and Northwestern, like you could see that game putting up, which is why I like slates like this, because you can move stuff around and things like that. Let's move on over. We got one question. Playing Devin Neal and captain with a Duggan stack, do you think that's going to be heavily duped? I'm guessing this is showdown. It might be duped, but I think Neal is viable. Like you said, Neal is a tough one. I've been going back and forth on him just because, like, is he going to get up? Like, if you were going to tell me he's going to get 15 to 20 carries here, I say it'd be a great play. If Kai Thomas and Savion Morrison are going to rotate around, then that's going to change things up a bit. But yeah, the only other guy I'll mention at running back, I mentioned him a little bit earlier, is Donovan Edwards. If Blake Corum doesn't get a bunch of work and Donovan Edwards can line up at receiver too, I think Edwards is worth looking GPP. He's cheap, caught a touchdown last week. Don't think he's going to be heavily owned or anything like that, so I don't mind going to Donovan Edwards. Let's go over to receiver here, as you've got everyone. DraftKings for the most part here, they always kind of, I'm not saying mess up receivers, but have some guys up in the 7Ks that really shouldn't be there. But you don't have a receiver over 8K, and you've got, I think, the 7th highest price receiver there in Charlie Jones, who's very interesting. So starting above that 7K, I think Badger and Veely, or once again, that's just like DraftKings, what are you doing? But then you got the two, actually you only have the one, Marvin Harrison and Marvin Mims. What are you kind of doing with this range when, Gabriel probably going to be out? I don't know what you think about these wide receivers above 7K, where you're looking at.
Above 7K, Charlie Jones jumps out. Adunze jumps out. And I've kind of upped my personal projection on Marvin Harrison since the Mayan Williams news. I think it kind of trickled down to everybody in the passing game, gets a little bit of a bump for Ohio State. So those are the three main guys. Marvin Mims is still interesting because, like I said, this game, I don't know, I put something in the survey earlier about, like, the final score is like in the 80s the last 5 years in this game. It's just a shootout all the time, no matter who the classier team is and the team you think should win. There's been like double-digit favorites, and it still shoots out. So he's interesting. You just never know in a game like this. Veely is like, he's the guy who stands out. What are you doing there? But, man, we've already talked. So we got Utah, UCLA. Utah's the favorite. A 34-point team total. Nobody will play him. I don't know how much I'll get to him, but think about it. How else are they, they lost their number one pass receiver, Kuth.
Yeah.
So now it's just a two-man show, Veely and another tight end. How do we know this isn't the game that this guy, they pepper him for 100-plus yards and 2 touchdowns, and that's enough to get you? So he stands out as a bad play right here at 7,400, and one nobody will go to. That's why his projection's so low on ownership. But, he's a tournament guy. That's about it. He's a tournament guy. And then, I talked about Charlie Jones. I don't have to talk about Charlie Jones. He just, unless he gets hurt in game, which he's done twice now this year and lost a bunch of snaps because of it, unless he gets hurt in game, he's probably going to get there. They just pepper him so much that there's, the relationship with the quarterback you can't beat that narrative right there. But then there's also Brock Bowers, we talked about Stetson Bennett. Could be the 4 passing touchdown Bennett day today. And if it happens, this guy could be a slate breaker at tight end at 7,100. So he's another guy I got my eye on.
Yeah. Stetson, they've been running that tight end sweep, which tells you all you need to know about how good Brock Bowers is. Like, they're running end arounds for their tight end, and he's taking them 75 yards to the house. So Stetson if you're playing Stetson today, you hope that doesn't happen. You hope they just connect on a long pass. But I mentioned Penix. I like Adunze a lot. I think a lot of people are going to go down to Jalen McMillan, who's $1,000 cheaper. But Adunze was the guy last year, even with bad quarterback play. He's got to love having Penix back. He's a little bit banged up earlier in the season, but I think he's got 7+ targets in the last 3 games. And so I think he's definitely viable against, I've already mentioned Arizona State and just how bad they are. And yeah, Charlie Jones, he should probably be the highest, definitely should be the highest price receiver on this slate. So getting him at 7K is definitely a discount. So moving to the 6Ks, you've probably got the biggest, and I mean, it's not a huge, I'd say, misprice on the slate. We'll see what you think about that. But Emeka Egbuka, especially with JSN, he is ruled out. Him being 6,700, you see the 43%. He's going to be the chalkiest guy. When you have something like that, Chop, especially when you're looking at in the GPPs, I know what my stance usually is, and when you have guys that high owned, like I don't think you really gain much by matching the field. But what are you doing with Egbuka and GPPs?
Yeah, on DraftKings, I'm going over. I'll probably be twice as much as the field. It's just a cheap price. I could get burned. The weather scares me, obviously, but yeah, if I get burned, I get burned. I just think it's a little bit of a mispricing, like you said, not by a lot, but enough to where what is CJ Stroud going to do today? What's his realistic numbers? We got to think it's 300 plus yards. Well, who's he going to go to? Now we got JSN is out, so this guy's been the guy who's kind of taken over that spot. So yeah, I don't. How can Amika? How can he kill you? What can he do to crush you? There's just not a lot. If he goes out there and gets his 100-yard bonus and a handful of touchdowns, he's not crushing you in GPPs at this price tag. The floor is pretty safe with him, is what I'm saying. Like last week's game against Rutgers, the blowout, everything that went along with that, Mayan Williams going crazy, all that other stuff. That's I guess you want to call that his floor at 11, but I think his floor is probably realistically even higher than that, barring an injury. So that's not going to kill you. It's not going to win you a tournament, though, but it's not going to eliminate you if you get all the other pieces right. And then we know what his ceiling is, though. And then the ceiling on the guy like that is tough to pass up on. So I'm not with the field. I'm going to be above the field by quite a bit. I just think he's the class of this category.
Yeah, I agree. And you can see the ownership around him, right? I mean, he's going to consolidate a ton of ownership. One guy I mentioned in this range is Jake Bobo. He's become the number one guy for UCLA. And I know we keep going back to that Utah-UCLA game, but I think that's just one of the games that's really getting overlooked on this slate and can definitely pop out like a DTR. Bobo and Charbonnet, if they put up 40-plus points, that stat could crush. Moving down a little bit more in the 6Ks, I think you've got probably the next two options that are going to be pretty popular, and Xavier Worthy and Jalen McMillan. I really like those guys for GPPs. But anyone you want to mention just between, let's say, 6.5 and about 5K at receiver?
Yeah, there's okay. Let's clean up some news. It looks like they're saying Dominic Lovett is warming up, so that's a good sign for him. We'll see if he plays. We'll get to him in a minute. He's really cheap. Looks like Cam Camper is in on this slate. Camper's in. So that's interesting. And then, I think that's the big stuff, right? We're not worried about those guys. But, yeah, so we got that going for us. Xavier Worthy. You talked about Penix. Jalen McMillan are the two guys who really stand out here for me. McMillan, I would favor Odunze, but it's kind of a two-headed monster there. I mean, if you're into the double stack thing, that's, Penix double stack right there. Those are the two guys. I think Xavier Worthy is a fantastic pivot away from or leverage away from Bijan if you want to do that. He was incredible on the night slate last week. He's the winner. He won it for you on the night slate on DraftKings last week. If you got away from Bijan and played Xavier, now we know he's kind of a little bit healthier in this matchup. I really like Xavier Worthy. I'm probably not playing a running back, wide receiver on the same team, but who knows? Texas might be the one team that makes it worth it. But those are the two guys that stand out for me. Other than that, there's just some GPP grabs, but I don't know if you have anybody different.
Yeah, I mean, Luther Burden, I think you mentioned Dominic Lovett's out there warming up, so he's 3.8K. If you just want to almost sort in wide receivers, you're going to need some value. So if you almost sort by point per dollar, you're going to get Xavier White is going to basically pop up, which we'll get to in a minute at, 3 point. If Miles Price is out, that's another injury to watch this afternoon. He got 10 targets last week, so you'll see he's really cheap. Dominic Lovett also projects very well. Schoonmeyer, I don't know if I'm going to have any Schoonmaker, but once again, it seems like every time I look at a box score, he's getting a catch. And Dalton Kincaid also for Utah. So these are some of these value plays as you kind of round out this range. I will mention a value play that I mentioned and he's not going to project very well. It's Justin Robinson from Mississippi State. Leach is very, he rotates a lot at wide receiver, and he also punishes these guys for any mistake. Like Jalen Wally last year would run a bad route and get pulled. Caleb Ducking fumbled last week, and Justin Robinson came out of nowhere and played the most snaps. So I definitely think that Justin Robinson at 3K, you can do a lot worse than him at that price tag, just because I think, if he comes out against this Arkansas defense, you really don't need that much from him, right? You're trying to get these 3K guys just to give you at least some points. 10, 15 points can go a long way. So I'll just wrap that out. Chop, what do you think? Like Xavier White, he's probably going to be, I think he's going to be closer to like 30, 35% owned, like below 4K. Any guys, like, what do you think about Lovett and just some value that you probably rather get at wide receiver than running back? So what are you just looking, some value fillers that you're looking at wide receiver?
Yeah, love it. He's warming up, so I guess I'll keep him in the pool. I think that was probably an egregious misprice there if the guy's healthy. If he's not healthy, then we got scammed. But he's fine if he's healthy. He's a good misprice. Xavier White should be the chalk play if Miles Price is done. So you got to keep that. You got to keep an eye out for that. You mentioned Robinson. Always got to be leery of Mike Leach. Wide receivers, you just don't know. And Keaton from Tennessee, with Tillman out, he gets a little bit extra run. I also want to go back to those are the guys I like to round out the receivers. It looks like KJ Jefferson is dressed out, taking snaps during pregame, so maybe KJ is going to play, which I think ups Raheem Sanders' stock a little bit. So I don't know. It's coming in now.
I'm feeling this is going to be a fun slate because you're going to get a bunch of news. I mentioned Xavier White. If you're going to play him this afternoon and Miles Price is going to play, I would just be wary. There's not that much that you can swap to. But, it looks like KJ is out there warming up. And so that definitely is a boost, I think, to Rocket Sanders for sure. So I don't mind playing him, especially I think that makes him become a much better play because that offense is probably going to move a little bit more down the stretch. So haven't seen any questions. I think there was a question earlier on Judkins. Where is that at? Saw it in the Discord earlier. Stroud Richardson or Hooker Sanders for GPP. I'd probably lean Stroud and Richardson there. I don't know what you think on that, Chop, between Stroud and Richardson or Hookers and Sanders.
Oh, man. Yeah, probably the Stroud side. Go with that one. Also, it looks like so Dominic Lovett is returning. Looks like he's out practicing punt return, so that's a good sign for him probably. And also, it says that Dylan Gabriel is full pads taking snaps from the first team center. So who knows what that really means? But that it can only really boost that offense in general, I think, and it can't hurt it. Although, it was a head injury, right? So.
Yeah, it was a concussion. So
I'm surprised that they would even entertain the idea of, after the whole Tua thing, just let the kid have an extra week at least. There's no real, I don't know, just me. I don't know. I'm not a doctor though.
I'm surprised he got up from that hit. I mean, that hit was brutal, and that's one thing you talk about targeting all the time. But that guy probably should have been suspended for a couple games. Just Gabriel going into the slide, just a really dirty hit. But like I said, if you guys are in the Discord, make sure you get in there and monitor. I think this is going to be a slate where you need to monitor every single lock. So coming up here in about 40 minutes, and then the afternoon games kick off at 2:30. So make sure you stay up to the date. And if you're playing a good percentage today, make sure that you are staying in touch with inactives, because it's definitely going to be, I feel like, a good 40 minutes going into lock, where you can basically just make sure you monitor all those news going forward. One note before we get out of here: can we play Jaden Bray? Looks like he will return at 3K flat. Sure. I mean, if you want to, 3K, you don't need that much. And, if Texas Tech's defense is going to give up. If Bray's back in there, I think that knocks some of the other receivers. So that's definitely something to look forward. We're going to go ahead and get on out of here. Thanks, Chop, for joining me this morning, and Steve for producing for us. And we'll be back next week on the College Football Pre-Lock Show. Good luck to everybody this Saturday, and let's have another good college football week in Week 6.